Okay, so a legal document from Bhutan from 1999. I know, it probably doesn't sound like the most exciting topic, right? But what if I told you it's actually the ultimate rule book for a financial crisis? Today, we're going to dive into Bhutan's Bankruptcy Act and see how it creates a structured, fair process for when someone's entire financial world gets turned upside down.
I mean, it's a really basic question, but every single economy has to figure it out. When debt just becomes completely overwhelming, what's the fair and orderly way to handle it? Because just letting it all fall into chaos, that's not really an option. There has to be a system.
And that is exactly where this law from Bhutan comes in. We're going to use it as our guide, our case study, to really understand the universal ideas behind bankruptcy. How a society can build a pathway from a financial dead end to a genuine fresh start.
So the first thing you've got to understand is that this act, it's not about punishment. It's a rule book. That's the best way to think about it. It's a structured procedure designed to manage a really messy, complicated situation as fairly as possible for everyone who's involved.
And this really gets to the heart of the matter. On one side, you've got creditors, the people who are owed money. They have a right to get paid back. But on the other side, you have a debtor who needs a chance to hit the reset button and become a productive part of society again. This law, it's like the referee, trying to strike a balance between those two very real needs.
All right, so how does this whole thing even get started? I mean, it doesn't just happen out of the blue, right? The law is actually very specific about the actions, or triggers you could call them, that officially kick off the whole bankruptcy journey. So if you look at Section 10 of the Act, it lays out these official acts of bankruptcy. And these are really specific things, like say you start moving your property around to hide it from people you owe money to, or you just flat out tell your creditors, hey, I'm not paying anymore. Even just failing to pay a final court order, yep, all of those can be the trigger. The law draws a very clear line in the sand. Okay, so one of those triggers happens. What's next? Well, you have to make it official. You have to file a petition with the court. But who actually gets to knock on the court's door? And this is where it gets really interesting, because it's not just a one-way street. A creditor, someone you owe money to, they can force you into bankruptcy if the debt's big enough and one of those trigger events just happened. But, and this is a big but, you, the debtor, can also raise your hand and say, I need help. You can voluntarily file for bankruptcy when you know you just can't pay your debts. It works both ways. And the law even puts a number on it, 10,000 Nolguntrum. Back in 1999, this was the line in the sand. It made sure the courts were dealing with serious financial problems, not just, a small late bill. All right, so the petition is in. And this is the moment where everything flips. The court officially steps in and takes control. And that, as you can imagine, has huge consequences for the debtor and everything they own. So the big legal move here is called an order of adjudication. Sounds fancy, right? But it's basically the judge bringing down the gavel. Section 43 says this is the court's official stamp saying, yep, this person is bankrupt. And from that exact moment, the debtor's stuff, it's not really theirs anymore. It belongs to the court. So who's in charge of all that stuff now? That's a person called the receiver. Think of them like the court's project manager. Their whole job is to take all the debtor's assets, see what they're worth, and then manage the process of handing out the proceeds to the creditors as fairly as possible. They're the neutral party in all of this. Now, I know what you're thinking. Hearing that all your property goes to the court, that sounds absolutely terrifying, right? Like you'd be left with literally nothing. But the law is smarter than that. It has a really important kind of compassionate safety net built right in. And this is where you really see the human side of the law. Section 36 makes it super clear that some things are off the table. The law basically says we're not here to strip away someone's dignity. So things like religious items, the tools you actually need to do your job and earn a living again, your basic clothes and furniture, and really important stuff like health aids, all of that is protected. See, it's not about punishment. It's about making sure that fresh start is actually possible. Okay, so the receiver has done their job. The assets have been handled. Now we get to the end game. At least from the debtor's point of view, it's called the discharge. And honestly, it's the whole reason they went through this in the first place. And this right here, this is the promise. This is the light at the end of a very long, dark tunnel. An order of discharge means the slate is legally wiped clean. It frees the person from having to repay all those debts that were part of the bankruptcy case. This is it. This is the legal fresh start. But just like with a property, it's not a total free-for-all. That fresh start comes with some really, really important exceptions.
Yeah, this is where the law says no way. Section 77 is very clear about this. You can't use bankruptcy to get out of debts you got through fraud, or if you maliciously hurt someone. And this one is absolutely critical. You cannot escape paying things like alimony or child support. Society basically decided that some responsibilities are just too fundamental to be erased.
So let's zoom out a bit. Let's pull all these pieces together. What's the big picture? What does a system like this actually do for a country?
You know, it all boils down to one word: balance. Instead of a total mess where the loudest creditor gets paid and everyone else gets nothing, an act like this creates a clear, predictable roadmap. It brings order to what would otherwise be financial chaos. It makes sure creditors get a fair shake, but it also gives the debtor a real, tangible path back to being a productive member of society.
And in the end, a law like this is really a society's answer to a massive question. It's a reflection of what we value, things like second chances, personal responsibility, and what we consider fair. And it leaves us all with something to think about. Where do you draw that perfect line between forgiveness and responsibility? It's a tricky balance that every country, in its own way, is trying to find.